do that before I forget. There it is. And as I said, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you here for our fourth session of Husky How To. We have a really seasonally appropriate topic for today with a fantastic speaker who I will introduce in just a moment. This event today is in partnership with our NU at Noon programming series. So I'd like to extend a special welcome to our NU at Noon crowd as well. Great to see you as always. A bit of housekeeping, then we can dive in. If you need closed captions, you can turn them on in your settings in this Zoom meeting. We'll have remarks from our speaker, followed by time for Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions to the chat at any time, and I'll moderate those after the presentation. Also, you have the option to use raise your hand feature during the Q&A if you'd like to ask your question live. This session, as I mentioned, is being recorded and will be posted to the Alumni Relations YouTube channel afterwards. I encourage you to check out some of our other recordings as well. There's some great content on there. And speaking of great content, I am so excited to begin today's session, How to Create a Sustainable Backyard Habitat. Just in time for planting season, Steve Schneider, Northeastern's Director of Horticulture, will share with us what we can do in our own spaces to provide an environment for nature to thrive. And for those who have seen Boston's campus in person, you know that Steve is the perfect person to speak to this topic. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Steve, take it away.
Thanks, Gina. And thank you everybody for tuning in today. I wish we could all be in person. And that way I'd get an idea of who's from where. So just FYI, I know that we could hail from all parts of the world hopping on Zoom like this. This is more, the discussion here is going to be very New England centric, so Boston campus centric, but I know that there could be folks in warmer zones, colder zones. If you're in colder zones, I'm so sorry. But we're going to be focusing on sort of Boston, which is my native town. I grew up here. I was a student at Northeastern from 95 to 2000. I graduated with a biology degree. And then I went off to the Arnold Arboretum, which is just 3 miles away from campus here. And I worked there it was one of my co-ops, and I worked there for over 21 years in many different capacities before coming back to Northeastern in my current capacity in June of 2021. So I've been back, and I've been just loving being back. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get back to the campus was because of its unique qualities. It being, as you all know, a very, very urban space, but not having that urban feel necessarily. And that effect, if you will, was the work of a lot of people. My predecessor being one of them. Some of you may have met him or have heard him talk or have been on one of his tours, Chuck Dowdy, who spent 40 years greening up Northeastern before I inherited the operation here. And Chuck was a big part of the campus becoming an accredited arboretum. So yes, both the Boston campus combined also with the Oakland campus, we are a level 2 accredited arboretum. And I won't get into all of the criteria for that, just that having a curated collection of plants where we have records, they're labeled, they're mapped, and they are diverse in their taxa. So many different species, varieties, and cultivars. And all of those bits and parts create a fantastic thing that we call habitat. So moving right into it, my goal today is to get through my spiel as quickly as possible so we can get to your thoughts, your questions, and have more of a Q&A section here, because I'm sure you have questions, especially after this brutally cold winter and very, very dry summer and fall season. But let's rip through a few things first. There's always something that goes wrong. Let's see. Looking to advance my slides. There we are. If you're looking to talk about this today, you're in the wrong place. This is beautiful, depending on what you like and what you don't like. But this also represents a lot of work and a very sterile touch, in my opinion, to a landscape. There are people that want to achieve this, and that's fantastic. But this isn't necessarily the approach that builds the habitat that we're interested in here on campus, although we do have parts of campus where we treat like this, but we're more interested in achieving this. So here we have some lovely snowdrops. You can see some trillium in the background there. But you're also looking at, yes, I know, leaf compost, leaves that have been left. And you'll hear me talk about that again several times, talking about lead the leaves. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is something that we should all be interested in doing for at least part of the year. So when you're thinking about building habitat in your yard, there are some things that you need to consider. So as a gardener, there's a couple things. You should be planning all of the time, and you should be prepared to kill plants. A very wise person once said to me, if you're not killing plants, you're not gardening. So remember that or write it down, because you will kill a lot of things, but that's okay. That's what they're there for, right? As long as you get some things to eventually grow. But you really have to ask yourself, what is it that you want? Everybody has the internet. You can hop on and you can be influenced by a whole array of characters that will tell you what it is that you should be doing, how you should be doing it. It really has to start with what is it that you want, whether it's, your backyard, your patio, what is it that you have, and what is it that you're going to be most interested in? Because even though we're going to be talking about how the fewest inputs can get the max returns, it's still, you have to do something, right? And so we really want you to think about what is it that you want. And then we want you to be realistic. If you have 200 acres, that you want to be beautifully groomed, you best have a crew. Or if you want to have this huge, vast habitat, but only are sitting on a postage stamp of land, you really want to rethink that as well. Here's an important one. Does everyone in the house share your vision? I have been growing plants for a long time. My wife, who has been with me for a long time, has been watching me grow plants. And last year, I decided that I was not going to, the year before, that I was not going to mow the front lawn. Now, we live on a main road. Everybody sees our house, and there were lots of questions. And we'll get into that in a moment. And she said, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing the no mow approach." And she's like, "I really wish you had talked to me about that," because she had an opinion about that. And so after discussing, I decided to advance to a different approach. But make sure that everybody in the household that you want to keep happy understands and is on board. Do you have the patience for this? Gardens evolve over time. They will change. This is not a painting. You cannot sort of put something out and expect things not to change. And you may want that change to get there sooner than the plants are willing to move, or the conditions of the growing season are willing to give. It takes a lot of patience to build a garden, and especially if you have the ulterior motive of building habitat, that's an extra step. And then, are you prepared to tell your story? If your lawn or your garden doesn't look like what's on the Scott's bag of fertilizer that is in your local box store, you're going to get questions. You're going to get a lot of side talk of, hey, neighbor, when are you gonna, that's interesting, things like that. And so be prepared to tell your story. I like telling my story, whether that person agrees with my approach or disagrees with my approach. But I always remain upbeat, and also with the understanding that the only person that is going to convince them that this sort of alternative approach, as opposed to the Scots approach, is a better way of going about things, is them themselves. So getting that dialogue going, telling your story, explaining what's going on, because a big part of this, right, is that we want to spread the word here and get the good things moving along. So let's start. Where can we start? How about we start by doing nothing? I mentioned before I was going the no mow May, as we call it. And what is that doing? Well, when you're mowing, right, we are attempting to perpetuate what we would call our monoculture of a lawn, right? I am, full disclosure, if you have questions about your lawn, you might want to save that for another person. I'm not your lawn guy. I am not a big fan of lawns. A monoculture, I use that word. A monoculture is essentially one plant, right, that is put in and perpetuated in a large amount of space. Monocultures are not great. If you can avoid them, avoid them. From a tree perspective, those of you who are aware of the Dutch elm story, the American elm story, we used to have beautiful, beautiful American elms lining many of our streets. And then in the 1950s, the Dutch elm disease hit and wiped them all out. And the problem, one of the biggest problem really, was that we had pretty much every street, all that was planted was American elms. Yes, they were grand, but when that disease came in, boom, they're gone. With our lawns, we are basically, when we want that nice green carpet that all of us were raised to covet, we were basically indoctrinated into a belief system that was perpetuating this monoculture of turf. And there are a lot of inputs that go into keeping that turf clean, if you will. Now, if we stop mowing, and I would encourage you, stop mowing. If you can do it for the month of May, great. If you can stop mowing an area for 1 year, you will be shocked. You will be shocked at what shows up in its place. There'll be grass there, but there's all kinds of other things that are desperately trying. I'm not just talking about the dandelions and et cetera, but I'm talking about things like clover, plantain, mullein. All of these plants are really super wonderful, and they are going to attract your pollinators. When I talk about pollinators, no, I'm not just talking about the honeybees. I'm actually especially not talking about the honeybees. I'm talking more about solitary bees, flies, moths, et cetera. There are, honeybees are essentially another monoculture. And not that I get hung up on native versus non-native. We'll talk about that with regards to plants in a moment. But honeybees are indeed non-native bees. Our native bees are, for the most part, all solitary, and there are hundreds of species out there, and there would be much bigger populations if we would provide that habitat for them. So try not mowing, or no mow May, or you can go straight to, I have a t-shirt that says this, kill your lawn. The gentleman up in the corner of the screen, I don't know if any of you who are listening to this or watching this follow Crime Pays but Botany Doesn't, is a YouTube channel that Mr. Joey Santori does. This gentleman is a self-taught botanist. real profession is that he's a train engineer, conductor, but self-taught botanist, and he is from Chicago, and you right away pick up on that from his accent. And he is quite charming, a little unconventional. If you can't handle strong language, he might not be the guy for you. But he is even less tolerant than I am when it comes to things like monoculture, habitat loss, big fertilizer industry, et cetera, et cetera. And so he has this thing, kill your lawn. And I can't stress that enough. If you're going to think about killing your lawn, that's a whole other lecture that we could get into, but that really takes some planning, because the last thing that you want to do is create things like erosion, compaction, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the extreme end of things, but it's also another approach. Fully being aware, and I just want to mention that we have lawn all over our Boston campus. This is West Village. For those of you who may be alumni that were here in the 60s, 70s, 80s. This lawn here used to be a parking lot. When I was a student here, these were the surface parking lots. I was actually a commuter for basically my entire 5 years at NU. And there were times when I would probably park right in this space. If you haven't been on campus in a while, you would be shocked. And there is some incredible things that have happened, including the addition of a lot of new green space that, yes, does indeed have lawn. What you're looking at here is an outdoor classroom. You can see the whiteboard that's set up, the instructor. She's a math instructor. This is a summer course up there teaching, and all the students hanging out in our lovely Adirondack chairs, learning, but in a very nice space. And yes, this is a space that is very appropriate for lawn. Incidentally, if you were to look at the same view today, on the right part of your screen where those trees are, there's no longer grass there. There is now beds that have been cut in about, I don't know, about a third of that space, and with lots of shrubbery planted underneath it. That is a space that, even though that lawn looks amazing, right? Everybody would love to have that in their yard. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of inputs it takes to get the lawn to look that good under those trees in that particular shade. Grass should not grow there, and now it does not grow there. But there's a balance, right? People space versus plant space. It's not to say that we do not do formal plantings. These are two of our horticulturists, Kelly and Brendan. And yes, we are planting this space up. This was last spring. But you got to understand that in the past, this space here was planted up with just annuals, right? Annuals that would be torn out in the wintertime or in the fall, changed out often. This particular planting is what we call a matrix planting. We have lots of different perennials, some annuals mixed in, and they're not planted in blobs. They're planted in what we call a matrix planting, where we kind of mix everything up so that it has more of a natural feel. This is as you can see, a very tiny growing space there, right? But it's one of the things that is our hallmark, where we're going to take little spaces, any space on campus that we can find, and we're going to try and green it up. Those plants there are a combination of pollinator plants. They are also creating habitat for especially solitary bees by doing two things. One is providing us food source. The other is actually providing organic matter, leaves, sticks, twigs, all of the good stuff that those little guys need to overwinter. We'll talk a little bit about that further down the road, that they need to overwinter in order to survive and then thrive the next season. Again, formal places. boxwood hedge. This is the front of Krentzman Quad, the main quad. If you, for those of you who were at the school before it was named, those hydrangeas that they're tying up are limelights. Are they great pollinator plants? You'd think they are, but they're actually not. It's actually quite a lousy pollinator plant. It wasn't bred for its food source. It was bred for these gorgeous blooms that they put on. So, you know, we are actually doing, of course, it's important. You can see that there are some impatiens and some sort of color off to the right there. And then the tulips. Everybody loves the tulips. This is a primo spot for getting your graduation picture taken. But again, very monoculture. There are spaces on campus where we need to put on the flower show. And so that's what we do. Another example here, the teardrops next to Reclining Man. Those are put in, taken out, again, in the lawn, providing zero habitat. Does it get a lot of photos, a lot of attention? Absolutely. But if we're looking to build habitat, not necessarily the way to go. For those of you who know the pond, you know, there's a lot of inputs, right? And on the slide earlier, I mentioned that we want to get as much bang for our buck by doing as little as possible. Here's the secret. You know, those pollinators that we're trying to attract, they actually do stuff in the garden, right? That debris, that soil that we want to build, please don't call it dirt, by the way. Whenever anybody calls, says, oh, you know, we'll backfill it with dirt or shovel in the dirt or plant it in the dirt. Dirt is stuff, right, that we sweep up off the floor and throw away. Soil is what we plant into. Soil is alive. Soil is not just this medium, right? It is full of fungi, bacteria, microorganisms, macroorganisms. But in order for all of that stuff to make what we call the soil food web, we need to work it. And I don't know about you personally, but I am not interested in working in the soil day in and day out when there's all this free labor out there, all of these organisms that we can attract to our yard. So if we provide the habitat, they will come, I promise you. And then once they're there, they start doing their thing. They start churning the soil. They start having symbiotic relationships with the plants and making them grow, making them healthy. Healthy plants means stuff that means less that we have to do. Now, on campus, one of people's favorite spaces is the koi pond. If you haven't visited, you should. But just a little dirty secret here. This requires a lot of support in order to make it successful. What's happening, what you see here is what happens annually. We have to do it just before commencement activities happen because it's just around then that we want it all clean before commencement, but we can't do it too early because right now, you know, last night it was about 33 degrees around here. The koi, who when this pond gets cleaned, are moved into these temporary pools for a day. But they would not like that. That would stress them out if they were too chilly, right? So, but we have a whole crew of people that come in and work hard as hell, fast as hell to get this done. There's a lot of input that goes into making this very naturalistic feel around this space. So then there's the stuff that we do, right, but we shouldn't do. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that this is a very, very smart crowd. And I'm going to guess that you're not going out there and doing things that you don't have to, or you really shouldn't. The next couple of slides, believe it or not, that I'm going to show you are actually northeastern plants. And I found them. This was the first year that I was back and went out to our wonderful, if you've never been out there, we have a marine research facility out in Nahant. And when I went out there, I was horrified because I saw things like this. This is actually supposed to be a small tree. little carpinus, little hornbeam. And you can see here that it was sheared, right? We love, 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 love to just do quick and down and dirty jobs, right? But it seems like every year, right, we've had this urge, this need. We've got to get out and we've got to start cutting things. We've got to start trimming things. We've got to start handling things. Stop doing that. Leave the stuff alone. I tell people over and over. It's because we're programmed, right? Okay, it's springtime. We got to get out and do our spring cleanup. Okay, so spring cleanup, get the electric head shears out and do something terrible like this. Look at this. This is a broadleaf hydrangea off to the right. You can see that not only have the canes been sheared, but the leaves are squared because they sheared right through that. I don't even know. I forget what the heck that shrub is next to it, but that's been sheared. Right, this here, there's so many things going on, so many terrible things going on here. The shrub in the background, that juniper in the background, it should be that's Juniperus virginiana. Beautiful, beautiful plant if you let it actually grow, right? And how many of us have seen as we drive through suburbia and we see all the little green meatballs that have been sheared to death because somebody feels as though this is how I earn my money. The landscaper's got to do something, so they're going to come in and they're going to shear, right? And all that's doing when we shear that shrub back there, we're forcing all of the vegetation to go to the outside of the shrub, as opposed to how it wants to naturally grow. Now, we don't want the shrub to take over the building. There are ways that we can prune it. We can prune it naturally and not do this shearing thing. And that also, once you prune something naturally and the plant is going to grow naturally, you're going to end up with a healthier plant. You're going to end up with a stronger plant. And that healthy plant is going to be able to contribute to your soils. It's going to build better habitat. Instead, what we're doing is we're basically draining the life out of these things and we're removing habitat as opposed to building it. The plant in the foreground, for those of you who are into invasive plants, this was my favorite. This is actually Rosa multiflora. I know you're gonna have to trust me on it. It doesn't look like anything right now. But those of you who know Rosa multiflora, it's one of the nastiest invasive roses out there. Not only was it growing here on campus, but somebody was actually shearing it as if it was something we wanted to keep. Really incredible stuff. And then this is the worst, right? This is, I kid you not, this is a ginkgo tree that has been turned into that, right? Sheared into some sort of ball. I don't know what they were thinking. That is the cultivar. Ginkgos come in all kinds of cultivars. American, right? It is a cultivar specifically meant to be a dwarf tree. You don't really have to do anything to it. Leave it alone. And they did this. It's really terrible. So, what is it that we're doing here on campus, right? This here, if you've been on campus, this is we're back in Krentzman Quad, and this is maybe some of the typical mix of what we're doing here on campus and some of the things, that we have to contend with, like a manhole in your planting bed. Right behind this, you can't see it, but there's a service pit with all kinds of mechanicals in it, right? But now, if this piece of vegetation wasn't here, you'd see all of those terrible, ugly, no good looking things, right? And would it be easy enough for us to just say have that hedge in the background, which is a type of holly, and then just have grass? Sure, we could have that. But instead, what we have here is a mix of plants, a mix of woody plants, a mix of herbaceous plants. And you can see a tree. That's a brand new oak that we put in over there in the background. And the layers. So adding these layers, and this isn't something that is difficult at all. It doesn't take much to do. And so instead of having just a piece of lawn, you're actually adding in some texture, adding in some color, and at the same time, you're building habitat. I will say a little bit too much habitat sometimes. One of our biggest pests, and I know I can't ask questions and have people do a Q&A right now, but you probably maybe you won't be surprised, but if everybody thinks like, oh, caterpillars or some kind of bug, no, our biggest pest aside from people are rabbits. Rabbits, the invasive cottontail is just plaguing our campus. We would have so much more plant diversity if it wasn't for the damn rabbits. The problem is people love the little fuzzy buggers, and so they're difficult to control, let's just say. Another common view here, and can anybody see the lovely bird of prey that helps take care of some of my rabbit population? Right there, almost in center screen, we have one of our resident red-tailed hawks. Incidentally, 2 summers ago, if you look up into the top right part of the screen, you see that orange bark tree. That's actually a Scots pine. Up in that Scots pine, in the middle of the day, a barred owl showed up, eating a rabbit up in that tree. It was great. You see the Curry Student Center right there. There were all kinds of tours that were being given to prospective students. It was a big hit. They loved it. It was great. But again, you can see here, and again, we're not using, and people wonder, are you only planting native plants? Why aren't you just planting native plants? There's actually, in this shot, I'm realizing it now, there's not a single native plant in this shot, not a one. The rhododendron is not native. The plant that the bird is sitting in is a large leaf magnolia. That is not a New England native. And neither is the Scots pine. That's a European species. But however, again, what once used to be a parking lot before 1990 is now turned into this spectacular piece of habitat that arguably is still, there's a lot of inputs that go into this to make this space look good. And maybe that's not what we're necessarily looking to achieve. I know I'm not looking to do this kind of work at home. I'm lazy. Spaces that we have turned into habitat quite successfully. This here is what we call Bullfinch Mall, and I'm hoping that everybody on this call recognizes that name. If you look at old pictures of this space, you basically had 5 trees and tree pits going down the center of this pathway and nothing on either side of the pathway. This was changed over, this was renovated, and again, pushing all of that greenery off to the sides, and then instead of having a straight shot, having what we call a curvilinear experience within the walkway, right? It almost is meant to mimic a meandering stream. And you can see that it's very lush, very green, and it's in layers. There's canopy, there is a mid sort of like there's tall canopy, there's what we call understory shrubbery and small trees, and then you see lots and lots and lots of what I would classify as green mulch. And where you don't see green mulch, you see a lot of leaf mold, right? And we can't do that everywhere on campus, but because this is protected more or less from the wind, and because it has that very woodsy feel, we can give it that very woodsy treatment. And so anywhere on campus where we can achieve this is what we're striving for. And I can tell you that, again, there's a lot of tree work that needs to happen, but on the ground, the goal here is to have minimal inputs. Speaking of the antithesis of minimal inputs, this is the pond. You see the pond. This is, right on the other side of the Curry Center. And the pond, as you can imagine, because of the fish and the water, people are drawn to water. This is one of our most popular spaces. And about 4 times a year, we would actually have to do what was being called rolling out the green carpet, I would call it, where the old sod that would be battered down by feet and chairs would have to be cut up and then fresh stuff laid out. And we would have to do that about 3 to 4 times a year. Not sustainable at all. I could drone on about that on, and you already know how I feel about lawns. Not to mention the fact that, like, think about the labor and the money spent, not good, right? So we wanted to rethink that. And really what it comes down to is, in this type of a situation, we wanted to define very well people space versus plant space, and then what kind of plants are we prioritizing? Are we prioritizing the green carpet, or are we prioritizing plants that are going to eventually grow in and provide habitat? Well, that's what we were going for. So you can see here a very, very different approach, right? So you have the large stone patios. For those of you who live in Massachusetts, that large stone there, that's called Goshen stone. It's from Goshen, Massachusetts. It is incredible stone. If you ever have a chance to put that in your yard, I highly, highly recommend it. But then you can see we're actually planting lots and lots of native plants, native shrubs. Those are two of my co-ops, former co-ops, Jonathan and Madison, who did a lot of the planting. And now you can see, again, picture before, you just had green grass, stone apron, pond, and now we're laying the foundation for a much, much more sustainable habitat, and not having to change that grass out that we pulled up 4 times a year. Just another example, this used to be a parking lot. This is our native plant garden, right? And so this space gets hardly any input. Those beds are essentially get some compost, and we are encouraging more and more of what we call the green mulch, lots of green ground covers to cover that space, create habitat, and not have to go in there and put a lot of effort into that. The trees, I'm very much aware, are not native. They are honey locust, more of a southeastern species, but they were there before the change. So we wanted to keep our urban canopy. Another space here. This was just a bunch of weeds. And this was a planting bed that was kind of like in no man's land over by the law school, right? But look at that. Look at that beautiful, beautiful sun. You can see how much shade I'm dealing with. Most of my planting spaces are in dry shade. It's rare when I get nice full sun, and full sun plus pollinator plants equals success, right? And so one of our co-ops designed our very first pollinator garden, and we wanted to create what they call a bee condo. This is an incomplete picture because that structure that's meant to look like a honeycomb should be full of reeds on end and pieces of wood and different medium that solitary pollinators will use to procreate. And right next to it is our apiary. Yes, we do have honeybees on campus. And now there is a bee club of Northeastern, which is exciting. One of the final things I'll say before winding down here is cleanups, right? Like, we clean up in the fall, we clean up in the spring, and how many of us have gone into our planting beds and have basically just done something like this and just stripped all of the organic matter out? And how many of our compost bins, with all good intentions when we started them, look like this, an unmanaged mess, right? Because then we realize, hey, this is hard as hell managing it. So why not do things to compost in place, or something like this? Now, this is extreme. That is rush, R-U-S-H. It's a type of plant, but there is no mulch in this planting bed here. Instead, we have this very, very green mulch, right, that is creating lots of habitat. That's a native rush. It is helping the bed retain moisture. It is regulating temperature. And let me tell you, those little trees there are very, very happy because of it. This is our boathouse. Any rowers out there? I was a coxswain when I was at NU. We redid the landscape out there. That's a whole other lecture. But the one thing I wanted to point out is that we can turn some of our spaces that are wetter, where we need to drain, say, yards that are soppy. We can create rain gardens. Rain gardens are fantastic structures that, yes, you can make. And it gives us an opportunity to put in water loving plants, right? And so again, could this just be grass? I guess. But instead, this is the same bed, but just a different angle. You see those beautiful bearded iris in there. You see some of the cattail coming up. Really, really fantastic stuff that is capturing the water, funneling it, and allowing it to recharge back into the water table. Picture in your mind this island with that magnolia in it, all grass. Why? Right? We would have to mow that. We would have to take a little mower and mow that. Forget about it, right? Go in there, kill your lawn, and we put all kinds of things, ferns. You can see some other woody plants in there, grasses, et cetera, et cetera. That's all going to grow in, create its own green mulch, create a better habitat for all kinds of flora and fauna. And that little magnolia there that's surviving in a very urban state is going to be that much happier. Staghorn sumac, I know the crap, right, that you see along the highway. Look, there are some places that I can barely grow anything. This is behind the library. This little sliver of soil, you can imagine what happens in the wintertime with the snow and the salt and the heat. The heat. But look at that fall color. Isn't that spectacular? And here's the cool thing about staghorn sumac, right? You have to do hardly anything. So in this particular case, it really is a right plant for the right place situation, because staghorn sumac will take over the world if you let it. But in this particular case, where you have a very well-defined piece of soil that is hostile, if you will, urban hostility in the form of soil right there. Those two large plants there, those were 1, 2 that I put in. And then see all the little ones popping up? Those are all the runners that are spreading and coming out. So the vision here is that real soon, even under those metasequoia, and we'll keep the ones under the metasequoia shorter, but these ones here, that open space, they're all going to be that tall, right? And it's going to occupy that space. And yes, we're going to have to prune the old canes out and encourage new stuff to come up from the ground. But that is going, instead of staring at a dumpster, you'll be staring at green that will turn into a bright, brilliant red. And again, with very, very little input and maximum amount of habitat. And the last thing I'll say is plant, plant, plant. Never stop planting. Every single square inch of this place, I can look in one direction and the next, and I can find 10 places to plant there, 10 more places to plant there. People ask me, Steve, you're going to run out of space. What's going to happen when you run out of space? Like when I run out of space, that's when you know that I don't know, we're shutting things down, because there's so much space. This was just last year's first wave of spring plantings, and those are big trees. I got a great deal at a nursery that was going out of business. I'm a bargain hunter. And some of those plants there are the rarest of the rare, right? And so those are big plants going in, and that was the first wave. There were 3 others after that. Save, again, getting back to being realistic, just real quick, when you're planting trees, I wouldn't expect you to do something like this, right? This is crazy. It's absolutely gorgeous. That's Acer griseum, or the paperbark maple. There are now 4 of them, right, in Krentzmann quad. Again, changing that quad and having it make me feel more and more woodsy, even though it's right next to Huntington Ave. But that's a big job. Don't go buying something that big if you don't have a piece of equipment and a crew that good to do it. Either pay somebody or plant smaller. And then this is the best. We are now at the point in the program with our co-op program, our Arboretum co-op program, where I'm starting to have students that are graduating. And every year, in the spring, any of the co-ops, the former co-ops that are graduating, they plant a tree in their own honor. And this was last year, and it was fantastic. And Indu, who is to your left over there, she's the one in the brown jacket with the soil. I mean, they all have soil. She's right now our full-time plant recorder. Temporary, but full-time. The one in the middle, Kay, she just got the plant records internship at Penn State. Jonathan is currently a grad student here now, and he is one of my part-timers. And then Allegra, with her big smile, she is a wildlife specialist working in Texas at a wildlife sanctuary. So all of these folks, there came in different majors, unsure what they wanted to work with, if they wanted to work with plants. And so with all of the stuff that Northeastern has going on and everything that we have to offer, and we're not a land grant university. We don't have a huge amount we don't have acres and acres, hundreds of acres of green space. But even in our little urban oasis here, we're able to sort of, prep the next generation of folks that are going to be building habitat and planting trees for the future. So that's my spiel. I hope I didn't go on too long, and I'm hoping that everybody has some great questions and is prepared for some good discussion if there's still time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. We definitely have some time. Reminder to folks, feel free to put your question in the chat, or if you'd like to ask verbally, we certainly welcome that. You can click on the react button at the bottom of your screen and click on raise hand if you'd like to raise your hand. While folks kind of formulate their questions, I do have one to start us off, Steve. Something that you had mentioned briefly in your talk, which I was kind of curious about if you could speak to a little bit more, is this issue of abundant sunshine and or the aggressive shade. And I think, I could probably speak for the group in saying that that is something that I experience in my own yard. And how do you navigate that? And are there, any kind of tips or recommendations that you can share with the group?
Sure. So I think that if you're dealing with a lot of shade, one of the things you have to ask yourself first is what's causing the shade. If it's a building, there's not much you can do. If it is a tree or two, there are things that you can do without having to say remove the tree. If it hasn't been pruned in a while, you can get a certified arborist, and I stress, underline in bold, certified arborist to come in and prune your tree. There are a lot of folks out there that will try and play the role of arborist. And if you're looking to have your tree removed, and that's one thing. But if you're looking to have it pruned, there are some people that can come in and in a very short period of time do a lot of damage. So, and open some of that canopy up. A lot of times, especially when we plant new trees, I tell folks, I have a lot of kids. And I have 5 teenagers at this point. And right now they need what I call formative pruning, because they're growing in all sorts of ways and shapes. And what I need to do right now is make some corrective cuts to put them on a more prudent path, right? And the same thing happens with a new tree. You put a new tree in, and right, it's 3 years. The first year is sleep, it does nothing. The second year is creep, grows a little bit, and then the third year is leap. And by the 5th year, they're leaping all over the place, right? And that's what we need to come in and do some formative pruning, so that you don't have a lot of crossing and competing branches. What will often happen is you'll have a lot of competing branches, and then it gets really big, and then those competing branches create a lot of shade. So a good arborist will be able to come in, open some of that up, and provide you with shade. Then it comes down to really the right plant for the right place, right? You can't, even if you love geraniums, but you have a ton of shade, I'm sorry, you have to find something else, right? So focus on shade gardening. And then if you're the opposite, if you're full of sun, and you want shade plants, you've got to start creating that shade. So that's an investment of time, building canopy, and whatnot. I
Awesome.
could go
Thank
on,
you.
but I'm going to pause. Yeah.
Do folks have questions? Something else?
I'm up for.
Oh, sure, Jean. Yeah, go ahead, Jean. You just have to unmute yourself. I might be able to unmute.
Okay, there it goes.
There you go.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And for any of you who haven't taken the tour, I know that Ian and her husband have gone on the tour. It's a fabulous thing to do. I mean, to actually physically go to the campus and take the tour with Steve. It was really wonderful. My question is, I guess, twofold. I don't have the big lawn anymore. I have the small balcony. And it's east exposure. It's by the water, and there's a lot of wind. And I've struggled over the last couple of years trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And truthfully, I have to water it not once a day, but probably twice a day. So my question is, am I better off trying to get someone who's a professional that can help me out? Because I struggle with trying to figure out which plants I should be using and which I shouldn't, and why this one isn't working. And the only thing that seemed to work was what is it called? Sweetgrass. And that seems, this is the second year that it has grown again, but it's slow in growth as opposed to what it was looking like when I purchased it. So it's trial and error, I guess.
It's trial and error. And yes, if you can get a professional who is, not just interested in taking your money, but actually interested in you lay it out there and you say, look, I wanna build habitat, but you have a very difficult situation there. That said, Gene, there are plants. Have you tried? Because sweetgrass is fine. Grasses are fine. But if you want something that, say, can be a food source, have you considered like Rosa rugosa? And do you know Rosa rugosa?
I don't know.
Okay, so you're by the water.
Yeah.
And Rosa rugosa is salt tolerant. It's wind tolerant. Um, it's thorny. It's not something that you want to hug. But not only is it going to produce very simple roses, so not like the hybrid teas that are, these are going to be very simple a true rose only has 5 petals. Okay. The roses that you get for Valentine's Day or you buy for your English rose garden that are all full, those have all been hybridized, but a true rose only has 5 petals. So a lot of times we can, and roses are tough. So a lot of times if we avoid those hybrid roses and go with more of a straight species, I don't even care if it's native, straight species rose, it's going to be tougher. And in this case, Rosa rugosa is a native. And not only is it going to provide a flower show for you in the spring and mostly summer, but then the rose hips, the fruiting bodies that stay behind, you're going to get a fall show. They're going to turn orange and then red. And then that's actually going to provide fodder for birds. And so it's a tough plant. I mean, I planted some of that. So I mentioned before, my wife wasn't too happy about me going with the no mow approach in the front yard. I get it, right? And so I just decided to just kill the front yard and just plant it up. And we live on a main road. It's very salty, windy. It's just we don't have the the benefit of the water. I planted Rosa rugosa over there, and I watched the DPW pile, a small house worth of snow right on top of those plants. And I said, all right, well, here's the test. And they're fine. They're budding out. They're doing just fine. Right. So you get the right plate for the right plant for the right place, and they love full sun. They love the abuse. It makes them better. The
Well,
other one that you could try, if you haven't tried, is lavender.
I have tried lavender. Yes, that is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a good one. Yeah. Thank you.
Now is it my turn? Yeah. Okay, I have a
Yeah,
question.
Bob.
Yeah. Have you got a crew who'd like to come over and get lots and lots of bittersweet?
Oh, bittersweet. Yeah. It's funny because so we obviously don't plant invasives on campus. Do we have invasives on campus? Most certainly we do. We have Bradford pear that used to be planted on purpose, no longer, but it's there. We have Norway maple planted on campus, some on purpose, some not. And am I going out of my way to remove all of that right away? No, I'm not, because in an urban environment like this, even some of the bad guys are actually providing habitat. They're providing shade. They're lowering heat island effect for us. Asiatic bittersweet has absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And so I wish I had a crew that could descend upon your plague. But between that and porcelain berry are just hideous. But if those of you who don't know what Asiatic bittersweet is, or Celastris obiculatus, it is an Asiatic vine that will just grow anywhere aggressively. And it was brought in as an ornamental. And then what people used to do is, because it does make this very beautiful fruit in the fall, and they would make a wreath out of it, right, and hang it on their front door in the fall. But then when it came time for the balsam to come out for the Christmas holiday, they take that, throw it in their compost heap or in their woods, and each one of those seeds germinates no problem. And then that vine will twine up your tree. And if you've ever, it's the closest thing we come to like a strangler fig that you see like in the jungle, in Malaysia, going around the ancient statues and crushing the stone. It's just terrible. No redeeming quality whatsoever. There is a native one, and there's a native Celastris, but it's not that.
But that still hasn't helped me get rid of what I've got.
Yeah, the big problem
Yeah.
is the runners that go underneath the ground and then just pop up in the middle of the lawn 20 feet away from the edge of the property. I mean, it's very, very invasive.
It's extremely invasive. I will say that if you find the backs, it's very shallow rooted. Unlike some vines that go straight to China, this is very shallow rooted, and you always know the roots because they're bright orange.
Orange,
You
yeah.
can't miss them. It's satisfying to pull, but that's if
Doesn't help.
all of your discs are, it doesn't. It's difficult. What I would say though is that there are ways to you make a plan, but you can't skip a year. You have to stick with the plan. And if it's just trimming and cutting and hacking, it will eventually succumb. But you're if you'll excuse the expression, pissing against the tide. It is not easy.
Yeah.
Wish I had a better answer.
We appreciate it anyway.
Even goats won't eat it. They won't touch it.
Really? I didn't know
They
that.
won't touch it. They eat everything.
So much for getting the goat, huh?
No goats.
Send some of the campus rabbits over to
Yeah,
Ann
that's
and
fine.
Bob.
Oh,
We
you
got
can have
enough of
them
our
all.
own.
Yeah.
Well, we are a few minutes over. So I'm so grateful for that, though. I am so grateful, Steve, for your amazing presentation, and to everyone for their questions and engagement. As I mentioned, this recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel within the next business day or so. I'll put that link in the chat, as well as a link to our events page. We've got a lot of other great events coming up, so I encourage you to visit that page for more information on those. That'll do it for us today. Thank you again, Steve. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Steve.
Wonderful.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye,
Happy
Loretta.
spring.
You're an encyclopedia of knowledge, Steve.
Oh, thank you, Jean. It's good to see you. And I'll just mention, as people are signing off, I should mention, if any of you have groups, garden groups, or whatever, clubs or whatever, that you're interested in coming onto campus, you want to take a tour, email me. If you don't have my email, just go onto the website and email us through the Arboretum. I'd be happy to have you. Love to take you around your campus.
We'll put your email address in the messaging with the recording, so folks will have it there.
Sounds
as well.
great.
Great.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Gina.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Bye.